Hey guys, so the Rekon 3 came out a few months ago. This is a production model here, and while this quad obviously was never the most practical one, there was always something cool about this concept, and I think this is what most people like, that you just can simply pop in one of those 18650s, and I think it's still satisfying to do this and have your quad fly. From the beginning, there were some requests. Will there be a Vista version? A DJI Vista equipped version? Is it possible to carry a naked GoPro or Insta360 Go type of HD cam? And actually the answer was always this is not really going to work on a 1S. It's just basically impossible to power a Vista from 1S. Despite the fact that the Vista is actually just too heavy for this type of quad to carry on 1S, same as an Insta360 Go. So if I put the Insta360 Go next to the quad, I mean, you can actually see how big this, in fact, tiny camera is compared to the quad. So it's just actually quite problematic to make this work. So this is the main reason why I came up with this concept here. This is sort of the bigger brother of the Rekon 3. It's a Rekon35, 35 because it has 3.5-inch props, and this is a 2S, and 2S actually enables to do all those things that were impossible with the smaller Rekon 3, GPS support, CADX Vista, HD cam mount, and so on, by having two of the lithium-ion cells power this thing and still have all the convenience of just using cheap standard cells, provided they are high quality and high discharge, and be able to fly this quad here, carry it along without having the annoying lipos and big charges and so on. Okay, so let's talk about the overall concept first. Now, well, we knew we had to make this work on 2S, so why not do it like Happy Model did and just slap two cells on there, one on the top, one on the bottom maybe. Well, I think it's a bit, I mean, this would really overload this sort of platform. Regarding disk load, it's quite a lot of weight on 3-inch, and especially, I mean, these motors are just tiny for and only work on a very light quad. So we'd have to scale up the motors, what a Happy Model did, I think, and the whole thing will, if you've seen some reviews of the Happy Model, will just lead to something that doesn't fly very nice and actually isn't super efficient. So we have to go up in motor and prop size and to a different platform to actually make this work nicely. Now the question was, how far up do we have to go? What kind of prop size? And actually I knew from 2.5 years ago, the original project, #MicroLongRange, my idea was basically to make it work on 2S lithium ion, because with 2S lithium ion you can still get away with being sub 250, which isn't possible anymore with 3S on a 4-inch or 4S on a 4-inch. But still, it's actually a pretty close call. That's an analog, so a lighter 4-inch. Doesn't even have the antenna, so have to add a few grams for that. And if we just put two cells on there, we're already at 250 grams, and this is without any battery tray, without actually or building this into a proper pack with an XT30 connector. So it's a very, very close call on 4-inch. Plus, there's another downside of 4-inch, and that is that it doesn't really fly nicely on 4-inch. So a 4-inch platform is a bit amp hungry for two 18650 cells. It just tends to be very wobbly and feel underpowered. So very, very difficult to make this fly nicely. The relation between the amps that the batteries can provide and the size of the quad just isn't very favorable to nice flight performance. But luckily, since we're not in 2018 anymore, but in 2022, we have something in between. We have 3.5-inch, and this actually, in my opinion, is pretty much a sweet spot for something 2S lithium ion powered. Because in terms of weight, and this is the heavy Vista version, the analog version is quite a lot lighter. It's 147 gram dry with two cells, and this is all it needs to fly. 236, so there's still a bit of margin to add some extra payload. Let's put an Insta360 Go on there. Now it's 270, unfortunately, with an Insta360 Go in the Vista version, but Usually, if you already have an HD stream, you have some quite nice DVR, and the analog version will be sub 250, even including such a camera. So it's quite a sweet spot. Also in terms of the powertrain here, the motors, they work quite nicely on 2S lithium ion. This is not very amp hungry at all, so it will not overstress the battery if they are high quality. It's 1303.5, 5500 kV motors. I tested several different kVs, and this is sort of the minimum kV that still flies nicely, has like a 40% hover throttle, and is very efficient. So the minimum kV basically that gives you a throttle feel that is decent is what is on here, because more kV just leads to overstressing lithium ions, and this is not anyway not really what this thing is built for. This is not a freestyler. So I went for this 3.5 inch platform. Also some extra equipment, camera mounts, battery tray is also included, obviously GPS, so all the extra things that were difficult to actually fit on a small 3 inch work very nicely on this 3.5 inch. Alright, now the next thing to solve was the frame design, and regarding the frame design, there would actually be one very simple option if you want a frame that works with a battery tray, to just have the whole thing basically separate and build a 2S battery tray that looks like this and just basically straps onto the quad like a regular battery. You could basically, you could just pop the batteries in here and have this here, and that would actually work just fine in terms of frame design and structure. But there is a little problem here. If I take this back apart, come on. And that is weight, especially for a sub 250. So let's look at this little DIY. Come on. Battery tray here. So this thing alone is 21, almost 22 grams. And that's a problem because there's 10% of your weight budget. You have basically almost 10% of your weight budget you have on a sub 250 quad. So what actually is very important here is to use this material, this plastic that is actually injection molded and fiber reinforced, as you can sort of see on the color here. I think it's probably glass fiber reinforced. This is pretty sturdy and stiff, so the idea is to use this as a structural element by taking one of these and combining it with a frame that actually uses this additional structure. So this is the Rekon35 frame, an earlier prototype, and this is super soft. I'm not applying a lot of force here. This is just the tip of my fingers, and I can bend this around like crazy. But as soon as this one goes on here, the both together they are actually connected with nuts and bolts. Both together are actually stiff enough. So this extra weight here, this one weighs 15 grams. This extra weight is just used as a structural element and not just as an extra weight that the quad has to carry around. So you can make the frame lighter. This one is only about 30 grams without the tray, 45 with the tray. So roughly the same weight as this frame only. So this is the basic idea behind such a frame layout. Now, a bit of a headache was fitting the electronics. On the analog version, it's quite easy because everything is just stacked on a 25.5 or 1 inch, on a 1 inch all-in-one mount type. With the Vista, it's a bit more difficult because the Vista is 20 by 20. So I sort of use these Oh My God Remix style braces here to have a mount on the bottom, a 20 by 20 for the Vista, and on the frame here, some all-in-one mounts. And these are flipped 45 degrees simply because it's actually quite difficult to get the screws in here properly. So in this way, they are still accessible. If this would have a normal orientation, they would be behind the plastic here. The screws are not accessible anymore. So not very good. This is why this is flipped. Makes the USB access a bit difficult, but there's an adapter in the box here, one of those. 90-degree adapter, so you can actually still access the USB easily. And if there's any issue, you can just remove one of those screws and basically fold up the entire frame. So everything is still quite nicely accessible. And that's sort of the gist of this frame design. Now then, of course, a few extras. So it's got the mount here for light HD cameras, Insta360 Go style or naked GoPro style, and the GPS mount here, which is when we had some problem with GPS reception because of the Vista, which tends to disturb GPS. So this is why this is a bit extended to the rear. It's not much, but this sort of extra 50 millimeters here really solves this issue, along with a slight angle here to have a nice orientation of the GPS when you're flying. So that was the frame design, to me basically solved. All right, then third topic to solve, the electronics. Now here, this was a huge headache 2.5 years ago, and it never really worked because the lithium ions here, if you really want to use the full capacity, you have to go to around about 2.5 volts. So you're very close to an input voltage of 5 volts, which is really the limit where such electronics work properly, especially the VTXs. Now, these electronics here on the Rekon3, they even worked all-in-one S, and nowadays this all-in-one here, this HGLRC 10 amp all-in-one, works without any issues on these 2S. So you will not have any issue with electronics shutdown, same for the analog VTX. Now the Vista is a bit of a different story. The Vista will get issues if it's only fed with 5 volts, but we could solve this quite simply with a separate power supply that is hidden underneath this all-in-one here. So the Vista will work fine. You can absolutely, with these electronics inside, you can absolutely push these batteries to the limit. I pushed this so far that the quad actually didn't have enough power to fly and just slowly landed, but never had any electronics failure or shutdown. I still had a perfect video image, while the voltage was so low that this quad was just landing on its own softly. And I probably permanently damaged the batteries I used, but really these electronics are very reliable in this quad here. And as I said already, we added a GPS, so this thing is actually really long range capable. While I always said that the Rekon3 is more of an endurance, relaxed cruiser type of quad, you wouldn't really seriously long range this. With this you can, because you have the GPS support, you have the cruising speed, and you have the flight times of at least 10 minutes to do some serious, at least mid-range flying here. Alright. That was the electronics. So I think last topic for today would be flight performance, and maybe also who this thing is actually for and what it is designed to do. Now, I would say while it is much easier to make something perform nice on 2 18650 cells versus 1 18650 cell, which is really very little power, this is still not a freestyle quad, and it's not meant to be. I mean, the KV, the props, and the entire setup was chosen in a way to just ensure decent flight performance. So the hover point is like 40% throttle, so this doesn't feel weird. You know, the stick isn't at the maximum basically while flying all the time. It's still quite reactive. It can do flips and rolls. It can handle a bit of wind because it's not that light. So it just really tries to fly more or less decently while still being efficient. And anyway, you know, putting more aggressive motors on there, bigger motors, higher KV just wouldn't do any good, because the only thing that it would do is overstress the 18650. So this is a very gentle setup basically that is made for cruising around, exploring stuff, and this is really what this is designed for. I mean, this is a quad that you can take along on your vacation, on your hike, your bike trip, or whatever you're doing, because it just needs less of the peripheral. So you bring your radio controller, you bring your goggles, and all you have to pack along also is like maybe 4 or 6 18650 cells and one small USB 18650 chargers that is not even as big as the AC adapter that your ISDT will use. So this is basically what this thing is made for. And I mean, it's got serious range. You have a Vista on there. You have a decent cruising speed. You have pretty long flight times, and you can have Express LRS and Crossfire. So you're going to be able to explore a pretty big area of this, cover maybe, I would personally comfortably fly this out 4 or 5 kilometers without any issues. So really cool sort of explore an area, just look at stuff, especially with the Vista. And you can record, as you see here, with an HD cam with the Insta360 Go Live on here. You can record some FD footage of the entire thing. So I think this is what this is made for. A convenient little explorer style quad to take along anywhere without bothering with tons of gear. Yeah, right. I think these were all the topics I wanted to cover about this product. Now, if you're interested in getting one, obviously you can find them on the Rekon FPV homepage, on Banggood, on I think Get FPV, most of the resellers. I'll link all this stuff in the video description below. And yeah, so I would say thanks for watching, guys. If you have any comments, any questions, well, leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.